The night my daughter left, the house went quiet in a way I'd never heard before. Not the kind of quiet that comes when everyone's asleep. This was the silence that follows heartbreak. I stood by the window, holding the curtain just enough to see her walk down the street. The streetlight caught her face for a second, and then she was gone. She didn't slam the door. She didn't even cry. Just a small, tired voice saying, "I need to figure out my own life, Mom." I wanted to say, "You can do that right here, with me," but the words stuck somewhere deep in my throat. Sometimes, love makes you quiet when you should speak. I sat on the edge of her bed after she left. The pillow still smelled like her shampoo. There was a half-open notebook on the table, drawings she used to make when she was little, butterflies, flowers, smiling faces. I touched the page gently, afraid that if I pressed too hard, the memories might fade. You see, Sarah was my only child. Her father passed when she was just 10, and from that day on, it was just the two of us. Two hearts, learning to fill the silence he left behind. I worked long hours, took extra shifts, and did everything I could so she'd never feel less than anyone else. She used to say, "Mom, when I grow up, I'll take care of you." And I believed her. I really did. But somewhere between growing up and growing apart, things changed. Our talks became shorter, our dinners quieter. She started keeping secrets small at first, then bigger, and I kept pretending everything was fine because I didn't want to push her away. Funny thing is, silence can build walls faster than anger ever could. That night, after she left, I made her favorite soup out of habit more than hope. The steam filled the kitchen, and for a moment, I imagined her walking back in, saying, "Mom, I'm sorry. Can we start over?" But the chair across from me stayed empty. The soup turned cold, and I realized that maybe this was what it felt like when love isn't enough to keep someone close. I didn't cry that night, not because I wasn't hurting, but because I didn't know how to. I just sat there, waiting, hoping she'd come back before the silence became a part of me. Before everything changed, our days were simple, the kind of simple you don't realize is precious until it's gone. Back then, mornings were filled with the sound of her laughter echoing through the house. She'd run around the kitchen, looking for her school bag, while I stood by the stove, frying eggs and warming milk. "Mom, I'm late again," she'd shout, and I'd reply, "Maybe if you slept earlier, you wouldn't be." Then she'd smile, that mischievous grin that could melt away any worry I had. Those were the days when love lived in small things, in her messy handwriting on the fridge notes, in the quiet dinners where she'd tell me stories about her day, in the way she'd fall asleep on the couch and I'd gently cover her with a blanket. I didn't need much, just seeing her happy was enough for me. After her father passed, I promised myself that I'd be both mother and father to her. It wasn't easy. Some nights, after she'd fallen asleep, I'd sit alone and talk to her father's photograph, asking him if I was doing it right. But when I'd peek into her room and see her sleeping peacefully, I'd tell myself, yes, this is enough. Sarah grew up to be a bright, kind-hearted girl. She loved painting, reading, and sitting on the porch when it rained. Sometimes she'd rest her head on my shoulder and say, "Mom, I don't ever want us to be apart." And I'd smile, holding her hand, never imagining that one day, that promise would be broken. As she entered her late teens, things started to shift gently at first. She became quieter, more private. Her laughter faded into short smiles. She'd spend hours in her room, sketching or listening to music. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd say, "I'm just tired, Mom." And I believed her. I wanted to believe her. I remember one evening, we were folding laundry together. She looked thoughtful, distant. I said, "What's on your mind?" She shrugged and replied, "Nothing much, just thinking about life." Then she paused, her eyes glistening. "Do you ever wish things were different?" she asked softly. I smiled and said, "No, sweetheart, you're all I ever wished for." If I had known what was coming, maybe I would have held her longer that night. Maybe I would have asked one more question, listened a little deeper, or told her again how much I loved her. But life doesn't give you warnings before it takes things away. It just leaves you with memories and the sound of a door you never thought would close. It happened so slowly that I didn't even notice at first. One day we were laughing over dinner, and the next, she was too busy to eat with me. At first, I told myself it was just a phase. She was growing up, finding her own space, but deep down, I felt something slipping away, like sand running through my fingers. Sarah had started her first job in the city. She was excited, nervous, full of dreams. I remember packing her lunch that morning, the same way I did when she was a little girl. She laughed and said, "Mom, I can buy lunch now." I smiled, pretending her words didn't sting. It wasn't about the food, it was about still being needed. Days turned into weeks, and her visits became less frequent. When she did come home, she always seemed to be in a hurry. Her phone never left her hand. Sometimes I'd be talking, and she'd nod without really listening. Once, I stopped mid-sentence just to see if she noticed. She didn't. I tried to keep our connection alive. I'd send her small messages, little reminders of home. Made your favorite soup today. Your room's waiting for you. Most times, she'd reply with a short, "Thanks, Mom, I'm busy." I'd stare at the screen for a while, wondering when busy became her new way of saying goodbye. One Sunday, I called and asked if she'd visit for dinner. She sighed and said, "Mom, I can't keep coming every week. I have a life too." Her words were sharp, not cruel, just tired, but they cut through me like glass. I whispered, "Of course, sweetheart, take your time." After the call, I sat by the window for hours, watching the streetlights come on one by one. That night, I looked around the house. The walls felt emptier. The air felt colder. Everything reminded me of her. Her laughter, her footsteps, the way she'd hum while washing dishes. I walked into her room, still untouched, and sat on her bed. There was a photo of us on the nightstand, her arm around me, both of us smiling like nothing could ever come between us. I touched the glass and whispered, "Where did we go wrong?" Sometimes, love doesn't vanish all at once. It fades quietly, hidden in missed calls and short replies, and before you know it, the person you love most feels like a stranger you're too afraid to reach for. I didn't know it then, but that distance between us was only the beginning. The storm hadn't arrived yet, but I could already feel the wind changing. It was a Saturday afternoon, quiet, warm, the kind of day that usually smelled like fresh tea and peace. But that day, something in the air felt heavy. Sarah had come home for the weekend, but the moment she walked through the door, I could tell she wasn't really here. She didn't hug me like she used to. Just a quick smile, distracted eyes, and her phone in her hand. I tried to ignore it. I cooked her favorite meal, lentil soup, the one she used to ask for after school. When I called her to eat, she said, "I'll eat later, Mom. I'm tired." So I waited and waited. The soup turned cold, and so did the silence between us. That evening, we finally sat at the table. I wanted to talk, really talk, the way we used to. I asked her how work was going. She gave short answers, her eyes somewhere else. Finally, I said softly, "You don't talk to me anymore, Sarah." She looked up, surprised. "Mom, I'm just busy. You always take things too personally." Her voice wasn't angry, just distant. I tried to smile. "I just miss you, that's all." And then she said the words that would echo in my mind for years. "Mom, maybe it's time I lived my own life. I can't stay tied to this house forever." I froze. All I could manage was a quiet, "You'll always have a home here." But she looked away. "I know, I just need to be on my own for a while." She went to her room after that, and I sat alone at the table, listening to the ticking clock. It was the same sound I used to hear when she was little and asleep in the next room. Except now, it felt louder, emptier. The next morning, I heard her packing, the sound of the zipper, the drawers closing. It felt unreal. When she walked toward the door, I tried to hold myself together. I said, "At least let me pack you some food." She smiled faintly. "I'll be fine, Mom." She hugged me, quick and soft, like someone saying goodbye before a long trip. Then, she picked up her bag and walked out. I stood there, watching through the window as she walked down the street. The sunlight touched her hair. She didn't look back. The gate closed behind her, slow, heavy, final. And in that sound, I felt something inside me break. I didn't cry right away. I just whispered to the empty air, "Come back soon, my girl, before the house forgets your voice." After Sarah left, the house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a museum, full of memories, but empty of life. Her slippers were still by the bed, her favorite cup still in the kitchen cabinet. Every morning, I'd catch myself making 2 cups of tea, only to realize I didn't need the second one anymore. For the first few days, I kept expecting her to call. Every time the phone rang, my heart would skip, but it was never her. Just a neighbor, a relative, a wrong number. Eventually, the phone stopped ringing. Nights were the hardest. The ticking clock seemed louder, the shadows longer. Sometimes I'd sit in her room, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume that still lingered on her pillow. I'd run my fingers over her books, her drawings, her old school trophies. Each one felt like a whisper from the past, a reminder of how full our world once was. I tried to stay busy. I joined the local women's circle, started helping out at the community center. People were kind. They'd ask about my daughter, and I'd smile and say, "She's doing well." But inside, I wanted to say, "I don't know how she's doing. She doesn't tell me anymore." Some evenings, I'd walk to the park where I used to take her as a child. I'd sit on the same bench where she once sat eating ice cream, her little legs swinging. I'd close my eyes and hear her laughter, light, carefree, and when I opened them, there was only the rustling of leaves. One rainy night, I found an old letter she wrote me for Mother's Day when she was 13. It said, "Mom, you're my best friend. I don't ever want to lose you." I held that letter to my chest and cried for the first time since she left. Not because of anger, but because I finally let myself feel the ache I'd been hiding. Days turned into months. Her room gathered dust. Sometimes, when the loneliness became too heavy, I'd cook her favorite meals, just to fill the air with something warm. I'd set the table for two, even though I knew only one plate would be used. Still, every night before sleeping, I whispered the same prayer: keep her safe, wherever she is, and if she ever feels lost, help her find her way home. I didn't know if she'd ever hear me, but it brought me peace to hope, because that's what mothers do. We keep waiting, even when the waiting breaks us. For a long time, I didn't know what life was like for Sarah after she left, but later, through her own trembling words, I learned how quickly her bright new world had turned dim. She had found a small apartment in the city. At first, she loved the noise, the lights, the feeling of freedom. No one told her what time to come home. No one asked if she had eaten. She thought that was independence, but slowly, it began to feel like loneliness wearing a different face. The people she called friends were busy chasing their own dreams. They laughed with her on weekends, but when the nights grew long and her heart felt heavy, there was no one to call. She'd sit by the window, watching the rain fall, and think about home, about the smell of my cooking, the sound of my voice calling her name. She told me later, "I thought leaving would make me happy, Mom." But happiness felt further away the more I searched for it. Money was tight. Her job was demanding. She learned quickly that the world outside doesn't care if you're tired or scared. There were days she went to bed hungry, too proud to ask for help. And there were nights she cried quietly, whispering to herself, "I'll call her tomorrow." But tomorrow kept slipping away. One evening, she got sick, a fever that wouldn't break. She lay in bed, alone, staring at the phone on her nightstand. Her hand hovered over my number, but guilt kept her from pressing it. She said, "I didn't want you to think I failed." As months passed, she tried to fill the silence with work, with people, with noise, but none of it sounded like love. And every time she passed a mother and daughter laughing together on the street, something in her chest tightened. She told me once, much later, "I used to dream that I was home again, sitting at the table, drinking tea with you, but when I reached out, you were gone." And that's when I'd wake up. It took her years to understand what she'd walked away from. Not just a house, but the person who loved her when no one else did. Sometimes, losing everything is the only way to see what truly mattered. And Sarah, she was finally beginning to see. But by the time she realized it, by the time she was ready to come back, I had already learned how to live without her. It was a cold evening in early winter, the kind of night when the wind carries a quiet loneliness through every open space. I had just finished dinner, another meal for one, when I heard a soft knock on the door. At first I thought it was a neighbor or a delivery mistake, but when I opened it, the world seemed to stop. There she was, my Sarah. She looked older, not in years, but in the weight she carried on her face. Her eyes were tired, red from tears, and she clutched her bag tightly, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. For a moment, we just stood there, two people frozen by memories and regrets. Then, in a trembling voice, she whispered, "Mom, can I come in?" I didn't speak. I simply opened the door wider and stepped aside. She walked in slowly, glancing around as if afraid the house might not recognize her anymore. Nothing had changed. The same curtains, the same photos on the wall, the same chair she used to curl up in, but everything felt different. She sat down at the kitchen table, her hands shaking. "I don't even know where to start," she said softly. I poured her a cup of tea, the same way I always used to, and slid it toward her. She looked at it and smiled faintly, tears filling her eyes. "It even smells like home," she whispered. We didn't rush the conversation. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. After a long pause, she finally said, "I thought I was doing the right thing, Mom. I wanted to prove I could stand on my own, but I didn't realize how much I was leaving behind." Her words broke something open inside me, Years of quiet ache, guilt, and waiting. I reached across the table and took her hand. I never wanted to stop you from living your life, Sarah, I said gently. I just wanted to be a part of it. She began to cry, soft, shaking sobs that carried all the years we'd lost. I'm so sorry, Mom, she whispered, for everything. I pulled her into my arms, and for the first time in years, I felt whole again. But even as I held her, I knew something had changed forever. We could rebuild, yes, but we could never get back the time we had missed that night. After she fell asleep on the couch, I sat beside her and watched her breathe the same way I used to when she was a child. And in that quiet moment, I realized forgiveness isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about choosing love, even after everything. Morning sunlight slipped through the curtains, soft and golden, landing gently on Sarah's face. For a moment, I just stood there watching her, her chest rising and falling, the same way it did when she was little and used to crawl into my bed after a nightmare. It felt like time had folded back on itself, but this time, I knew it wasn't a dream. When she woke up, she looked around as though she couldn't believe she was really home. Her voice cracked as she said, I can't believe I stayed away for so long. I smiled, though a quiet ache sat behind it. Sometimes, I said softly, life teaches us through distance. We sat at the table again, the same spot where so many of our memories lived. Only now, instead of silence, there was honesty. She began to talk about everything she had gone through, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the nights she cried because she didn't know where she belonged. She told me how she thought independence meant cutting ties, and how pride had stopped her from calling when things fell apart. I listened, not to judge, but to understand. And when she finished, I told her something I had kept inside for years. You never needed to prove anything to me, Sarah. I just wanted you to be happy, whether that was near or far. But love isn't about distance. It's about never giving up on each other. Her eyes filled with tears again. I didn't realize that until I lost you, she whispered. I kept thinking I'd have more time to make things right. I reached out and took her hand. Time doesn't erase love, I said. It only reminds us how precious it is. We spent the whole day together, cooking her favorite meal, walking through the garden, laughing at old stories. For the first time in years, the house felt alive again. But somewhere deep down, I knew this was her visit of healing, not her return for good. She had her own life now, a different home, a different path. That evening, before she left, she hugged me tightly and said, Mom, thank you for still being here. I whispered, I always will be. After she drove away, the silence returned, but it was different this time. Not heavy, not empty. It was peaceful. I walked to the window and watched the road disappear into the fading light, and I thought to myself, sometimes love doesn't come back the same way it left. But when it returns, even for a moment, it teaches us everything we need to know about patience, forgiveness, and the quiet strength of a mother's heart. Because love, real love, never truly leaves home.